Today, for the second webinar, we have Mrs. Tabitha Stadler. She's the Executive Director of Environmental Protection in the Caribbean, so EPIC. She has been with the international operations, including creating the vision, strategic plan, and overseeing all aspects of the mission implementation at EPIC. She began this role in early 2019 and splits her time between South Florida and St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands. Her career spans more than 30 years and encompasses leadership positions responsible for environmental education, science, research, and policy. She most recently served as interim sanctuary director and assistant sanctuary director at Audubon's Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, where she was responsible for all the operations of the Sanctuary Blair Visitor Center, as well as supervising public and youth education and volunteering and membership programs and marketing for the 13,000-acre sanctuary. She previously worked 10 years with the Rookery Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve, serving most recently, as the principal investigator and project manager for the 3-year Restoring the Rookery Bay Estuary project, where she developed and secured funding and oversaw all aspects of a successful implementation, which included hydrological modeling, habitat mapping, and social science research. And she's here today with us as one of our co-leads for the Adaptation and Loss and Damage Working Group to share a bit more on promoting Caribbean climate resilience through reducing plastic waste and toxins in the tourism and food service industry. So I am actually going to stop my presentation and allow Tabitha to pull her slides up. And once she has it up, we will get started. So Tabitha, thank you very much for taking the time to present today and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. So I sent a share request, and I don't think you're not seeing my screen, are you?
Not yet, no.
Okay, well, it said share request. So are you seeing something?
It should be fine. I enable it. Right. Perfect. So
Is it doing
screen
now?
is coming up.
Just taking a second
Yes.
there, I guess.
So I see your screen now, yes.
Okay. Let me see if I need to move my toolbars around a little bit, maybe. I don't know. Oh, what happened? It's not shared, right? How's that? Can you see the PowerPoint or not?
I can.
Okay, good. Thank you. And can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about climate resilience through reducing plastic waste, styrofoam and others in the food service industry. And I'm going to talk a little bit about EPIC, about the project location, which is in the US Virgin Islands, an overview of the project, and honestly, a big part of it is this background research that we did before we even started, which we always think is a best practice to talk to the audience you're going to work with and look at what other folks are doing. And I think I'm happy to send things afterwards with this substantial, interesting information that we found through that research, and then just tell you where the status is, and then wrap up. So a little bit to cover, but it'll go pretty quick here. So just to kind of anchor the work that we do, I know our Climate Justice Alliance is pretty broad, but we work in environmental conservation, which is this sort of intersection of, having people and nature kind of coexist. And what's really exciting now, you've got me here, I'm an older practitioner of actually 35 years in the field, is conservation started, I think, just doing research or just doing education, but now it's this like multidisciplinary problem solving where we throw a bunch of different tools. And so inevitably we're working at the intersection of nature, health, sustainable livelihoods, equity, justice, energy, etc. And I think it's so exciting because I really think that these are the tools that are really going to basically save the world and improve, our future. So just a tad bit about EPIC. Our mission is protecting the Caribbean environment through research and community-based action. So I hope today you see the research and the community piece. We don't specialize in a certain topic. Our approach is to basically work with a community. We have a whole network of on-island either nonprofits or kind of conservation leaders, entrepreneurial folks, and they identify the projects. So they're totally based on whatever that local need is, because conservation, I think, is local. It's about the tree in your backyard. It's about that favorite beach, that moment where you walk in nature. And so those are sort of what we're focused on, and trying to, like I said, multidisciplinary improvements using these tools. And our tools are the C's. We do everything from environmental science research and monitoring to environmental education with kids, or professional development and capacity building with adults. We work a little bit on advocacy, things like designating marine protected areas, passing plastic ban bag laws, and quite a bit of stewardship, which we think of as direct earth care, like restoration, tree planting, coastal cleanups, and that sort of thing. So that's EPIC. So this is the project today. I don't know maybe if I move that. So it's grant funded, so it's got this long, elaborate name. We want to transform the Virgin Islands to be healthier and more resilient, and we're focusing on pollution prevention. And I will talk about why that, which I feel like maybe seems like, oh, like, is that great and that resilient? But I hope I make the case today, but it really is significant to our communities in the VI. And so, snapshot of it, we were so fortunate to get US federal funding in a significant amount, $700,000 for 3 years. And of course, I know, that gives us some advantages in the VI, although the community still has many, many struggles that I'll share today. And in typical EPIC fashion, we have an on-island partner called the Virgin Islands Conservation Society. They're the oldest nonprofit in the VI, over 50 years. And they had this existing program here called the VI Clean Coast Program. And it already is out there reducing styrofoam. But we wanted to target food service businesses, restaurants, because the significance of tourism and how many restaurants are there, and the amount of single-use plastic. And the idea would be to have our Clean Coast coordinators here meet Zenobia up here, who works in St. Thomas, St. John, go out restaurant to restaurant, basically one-on-one technical support to eliminate single-use plastics and other toxins. We haven't quite gotten to the cleaning products, sunscreen, and these other things, but there's certainly a whole range of changes that we hope to make over time. We're going to do PR, and we've got a lot of partners. And that's kind of just like sort of a snapshot of the approach. Yeah, so this is the vision: reduce those plastics, improving health, and basically the community members being exposed to toxins, plastics, and pollution. And we really did make a big effort to focus on disadvantaged communities, is how it was written in the grant. And I didn't go into this, but just so you know, we actually did a mapping exercise where we took any data that we could find on health, on income, on flooding, and vulnerabilities in terms of climate and weather, and we were able to map the communities that were under, that were sort of most disadvantaged. And we have excluded anything like the big Marriott's, Hiltons, and we have a lot of big tourism places on the island, and they're not eligible for this project, which, by the way, also includes mini grants. So we can fund improvements for these small food trucks and restaurants to be more sustainable. And the vision is, like, if we can do this systematically, we could really have territory-wide positive impacts. The license list for restaurants in the Virgin Islands are there 300. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the territory, but they're not very, they're typical smaller Caribbean island places. So yeah, I'll just go on. So here's a snapshot, a little bit of the US Virgin Islands. It has 4 inhabited islands. The 3 big ones are St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John. They're pretty densely populated, and solidly a third of folks are in poverty. It faces all the same issues as Caribbean island nations and territories. It's very heavily dependent on tourism, but those jobs are often low paying and don't have benefits. All the food and the goods are imported and very expensive. There's no freshwater sources, so all potable water is coming from rain into cisterns. Well, for the most part, there's a little municipal water, and frequent hurricane storms and challenges like that. So here's the critical issue that I want to get in. And we always like sort of study our issues so that we're doing something that we feel is really meaningful and underaddressed. And in this case, we're going to talk about waste. So waste in islands is a big, big issue. And there's no recycling and there's no exporting or incinerating, burning the trash. Basically, everything that goes there stays there to these two landfills. So I know, isn't it? I've got a picture of landfills, right? On the left is the St. Thomas landfill, and on the right is the St. Croix landfill. And sort of in short, these are aging old school landfills. So they're not properly lined, and there's documented evidence of them leaching into the soil and into the nearby water. So that's health issues and obviously direct issues to natural resources, corals, fisheries, etc. And they are essentially, without the backstory, like condemned by the federal government. They are too full, they're not operating properly. And now, after decades of this situation, the government is really struggling. There hasn't been significant improvement, which is part of the reason why civil society, right, our nonprofits are sort of stepping in to try to help in many different ways. And so small example here in our project. So the way that waste are disposed of there are in these open dumpster bins where there's like a couple located in sort of the flatter areas. It's pretty mountainous there. And you can see this is post-hurricane. I can tell this is post-hurricane because there's no leaves on the tree, but you can see that they get over full and things blow away. I mentioned the water issue, but let me just say that there's a real common plastic water bottle debris problem because you can't drink the tap water basically in the Virgin Islands. It's coming from a cistern. It can be properly treated, but you don't know that. And while there is municipal water in the two little city centers in Christiansted and St. Croix and Charlotte Amalie and St. Thomas, because it's the water's good from the water plant, but it's traveling through aging pipes and infrastructure that have been damaged by storms. So there's cross-contamination from wastewater, stormwater, and all of that. So there was just a kind of a big news thing 2 years ago about St. Croix public water testing for various toxins. So yeah, so you don't drink tap water in the Virgin Islands unless you know that it's been treated. And so plastic bottles are everywhere. And then we also have this issue of no waste pickup. So we have these historic neighborhoods up on the side of the mountain with these narrow roads. You can't get trucks in there, and there's no trash pickup. Cars are very expensive, so everybody takes their trash and they have to sort of hike it downhill or catch a safari to get to a bin site. And so as a result, a lot of stuff just gets tossed, right? And tossed into the guts. So here on the left is just one of these ephemeral, when it rains, there's water here. And then you can see there's wastewater pipes and, also electric cables and stuff in there. And it's a little hard to see in the picture, but there's trash all over the place in these photos. And then in the flatter areas, some of them are hardened and you get big pieces of debris like buckets. And then this is like the outfall. It just all goes right out to the ocean or the embayments and area. Toxic stuff. And then we're here to talk about resilience. I just want to remind you that, of course, we have all these impacts from storms, but I don't often hear that much about the amount of trash generated post-storm, right? And the VI was hit by Irma Maria in 2017, like many places, 2 Category 5s, bam, bam. And 1 month after the storms, an entire year of trash was generated from all of that damage. The VI produces more trash than the average Caribbean island and also the US mainland, 450 tons per day. And a lot of that is coming from these 2 million tourists that are also throwing out their water bottles. And one last thing too about hurricanes is, we need the disaster aid kits, obviously, but those kits, if you've experienced it, are plastic water bottles, a plastic toothbrush, a plastic shaver, plastic diapers, right? And it kind of compounds that problem. Here's a really good look at an open dump site after a big rainstorm, right? So it's not just the blowing debris and the access, but we've got this kind of leaching going on. Yeah. And last piece of data here is just that they've actually studied this left pie is the University of the Virgin Islands Green Technology Center did grid studies in the dump in St. Thomas to show that the majority is food waste and other downed leaves, but the second most common is plastic, and further justification for our project. One of the most common items in coastal cleanups, which have been going on for decades, is plastic caps and bottles. And basically more than 90% of marine debris in the VA is just coming from the land. Like they can measure that, right? So yeah, so I told you the project that we were doing, right? We're aiming at restaurants. We want to help them reduce their single-use plastics, be more sustainable, more profitable, more eco-friendly. Prior to doing that, we did quite a bit of interesting research that I really wanted to share today. So the first thing we did was we looked at, oh, here's the overview. We did a literature review of other programs in the world and what they were doing. We interviewed the distributors for the people that sell to the restaurants. So they're selling them the food and they're selling them cups, plates, single use or reusable, whatever, and all that stuff. And then we got surveys with some restaurateurs. We only have 35. We've continued to gather surveys, but this is sort of our initial look at it, right? Because we don't want to just start rolling out a program and spending money like if we were to roll it out in the wrong language or have the wrong message, or you know what I mean. We want to make sure that we're anchoring our efforts in really serving people where they are. So the first one, I'm a little busy, but we looked at other restaurant programs in the world. So green restaurant, green dining, like who is either certifying or educating restaurants around these issues. And it turns out that globally there are a lot of them. So here's kind of our top 10 that we modeled. And I have this all in a spreadsheet and data if anybody wants to work on a program like this. We particularly liked the Rethink Disposable and the Ocean Friendly Restaurants. They both have case studies. So we really found out early on that there's lots of tips and tools out there. We didn't have to recreate the wheel. And the bottom line is the restaurants that switch almost always find it profitable. So we knew that was going to be a good message. Sort of in summary about the restaurant certification programs, I said they're found globally, but some are super simple where you just go online and fill out 10 questions and bam, you print a certificate. But there are ones that are like hundreds of criteria, very detailed about every element of a restaurant, not just the serving items, but energy efficiency and water, and is the food source locally grown, really detailed, and they'll have outside auditors. And you might have heard of FEE, the Eco Label program. It's international. Even their program for Green Flag, Blue Key, even they have some kind of food service pieces of it. So some of them even charge the restaurants. So we're not at that point yet, but that could be, maybe an option. I don't know. Everything's so expensive, but usually they have government or tourism agency support. But they are universally sustainability focused. They all eliminate styrofoam, and they all use like basically positive PR. Like we'll advertise your restaurant and tell you how green you are and give you a sticker in the window and put you on the website. And so that's like the common sort of way that they're incentivizing, which you'll see we also are planning to do and doing some of right now. They're generally voluntary though, not legal. This was one of our most significant findings, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this because it seems so obvious, but it really changed the way that we decided to do the program. And we always thought, like, as a first step, if people were using plastic and styrofoam, we could substitute bamboo, paper, right, and these other sustainable materials. But basically, after really understanding the landfill process, it just kind of hit us that basically the point of landfills is to contain the waste, right? So it doesn't leach, it doesn't blow away, it just keeps it there. It's not any kind of ideal conditions to biodegrade. So even food waste that goes into a landfill is really not becoming available necessarily. It's not going back into the water cycle and the nutrient cycle. It's being contained. Of course, I just said the VI landfills aren't so well contained. But anything that goes into a trash can, really not just in the Virgin Islands, but anywhere in the world, if it's going to a landfill, it's never going back into the natural system. So every single-use item, no matter what it's made of, is still technically pollution. It's still adding to the landfill, right? It's still just being thrown away. Now, let's not forget, of course, we still don't want people to use any petroleum products, right? We don't want to be that. We're trying to reduce climate impacts. So sure, you can change the material for health reasons and for those other reasons. But if we're, again, you heard my whole pitch about reducing pollution, we need to rethink what we're going to do. And basically, what it is that this reuse of reusables. And a lot of those programs that we looked at, basically we're going to those restaurants and saying, we'll buy you, dishware, silverware, or whatever. You'll save money because you won't have to buy these single-use items. And I'll give you some other tips and tools around that. But we really have shifted more to reusables. Now, we still do pay for and subsidize for people to test these alternative materials. And I'll talk about that later. But this was a really substantial shift for us that we think it just makes a lot more sense, right? And just so you know, there's actually two ways that restaurants can be using reusables. The first one I said was just if you were doing single use, throwing away plates, cups, whatever, replace them with reusable. But the second one is much less common, but it's sort of these borrow systems. So, I've seen it with juice bars and coffee houses and things. For an extra $2, you can get their branded coffee mug, take it home, and then you get $2 off the next time you buy it. So you're sort of like borrowing it and bringing it back. Sometimes they have apps and QR codes to track it. Sometimes they'll give you like a token if you bring it back, but you're not buying a coffee or whatever. And maybe a simpler method is also just allowing people to bring, their drink mug, which I do see in the Virgin Islands, particularly at like walk-up bars. People just bring their own cup and they'll make it in there. I just want to tell you that there is a concern about contamination. So in a walk-up bar real quick, but in a restaurant area, there's been a lot of data about like if somebody brings in a dirty bowl and then you put food in it and it's on the counter and stuff like that. That's a little bit of a concern. But we didn't think that second one would be all that well adopted. So we're definitely focusing more on just replacing items. So this was a bit of concern because that means that dine-in restaurants are going to be a better target audience than, and in the communities we were working in, it's more pop-up food places and food trucks. But there is, by the way, and I'll only mention one or two today, a whole bunch of other strategies that can work for those kind of places. And I put some pictures here to sort of, maybe I'll move this. I don't know if that's blocking it for you or not. But these napkin dispensers and straw dispensers. So it really turns out, and there's data that rather than a pile of napkins or even giving people napkins, when you have to pull one napkin at a time, people only take a few, and it's been measured that restaurant will reduce their costs and use of those materials. Same thing with straws. And then so in a place where they're just filling your takeout and they're just putting in, 10 napkins, a couple of straws, and all the utensils, is trying to get them to say, that's available upon request, like this sign, or what's kind of even easier, it takes a little less training, is just steering the customer to the station where they get their food and they go to the station and then they pick up their single-use items and take off. So, we still feel like we can serve that audience. We've got many of them eco-certified, but it's like a little bit of a different approach. So, this part. Plastics are just not good, need to be avoided for human health, environmental health, and use of petroleum products. So I just want to note that is in the report, even though I feel like, everybody here is gonna know this as a given. And so we did look at those alternatives to plastic and styrofoam, and just we're dividing our messages to switch to reusable. That's going to prevent pollution and health and benefits and sustainability. Don't use plastic and styrofoam because of your health and sustainability, right? So we can't really say it's pollution focused. But here's we did this whole table for them that we're now turning into like a website tool where we did our research to say, here's the not recommended things, plastic, and here's the recommended ones, paper, bagasse, bamboo. But we still say right at the top, all single-use materials are pollution, right? So try to use renewable. So that was good. That was a good piece of research. So then we did the survey. the restaurants, and it was and plus our coordinators are awesome. I think collectively they've reached out already to 116 different food service establishments, and the stories are so great. Talking about making their food with love and how important it tastes, and how when you ask them about the to go, it's like, well, we want that food to travel home with them without leaking, with warm, and good quality food. And so for us, these are the messages, right? That's what they want to hear. And that's what matters to some of them. And so it does fit well with the reusable. And I'm sorry, I don't think this is the best picture, but there are case studies where they just show here on the left in the styrofoam, it doesn't look as good and probably doesn't taste as good to folks as here it is on the reusable plate and bowl. Right. And I mean, I find that, you think about drinking a cold drink in the hot sun out of plastic, but drinking out of glass, or even nice when it's out of like stainless steel or aluminum. It's just so cold and frosty, right? It's just a better dining experience. And then we also found that they were interested in sustainability, although they're somewhat self-selecting, right? Because the people who took the survey were ones that probably already had an interest. So yeah, so that's some of our direct feedback from our restaurants that we're working with. We do want to do a more foam-free, is kind of what I've seen in the literature, campaign. So targeting the restaurants, but then trying to do more public things to get people to choose not to have foam. I mean, it's taken me years, but like when they deliver my kids, I have some younger kids, cup in styrofoam, I'm like, oh no, I don't want my daughter to drink out of styrofoam, right? Like, I know that that's really bad. And so that kind of public feedback. So we haven't started that yet, but there are some examples out there that we're hoping to borrow from. And I think we're talking to an influencer, we've got some other strategies in mind, but one of the things you do see is like the big stacks of foam that go out to the beach where they lay out all the food and the whole family's there in a big picnic, right? And so trying to address, styrofoam on that level, right, on a real community level is a goal of ours. So just in summary, we feel like this is a good model, this restaurants program. It was like modeled around the world, so it seems to be working. We're definitely going to focus on the two messages: dine-in restaurants with reusables, everybody no styrofoam and plastic. And we're going to try a foam campaign. And and we also had this realization, it's tough to run a restaurant. It's a hard business. And so we have just a lot of wonderful community leaders. So if we can keep it funded and keep it going, we do feel like we might be able to move on to composting and energy. And, there's a possibility to grow by focusing on that audience, right? And they are influencers, right, in the community. And we have lots of famous restaurants too, I'm sure. I mean, all the places I visited in the Caribbean have their well-known sort of tourist spots. So let me just double check the time here. Okay, we're doing good. So I just to give you an update on the program, kind of like where it is and what it's done. I do hope you got something out of that background, right? That's usable, and both the methodology we used and then some of the facts. And again, I will send things to people if they're curious about that. So on the right is the revised VIX Clean Coast certification. And no styrofoam is the first thing. They've been doing that for years, but now they have this more, elaborate and interesting ideas for restaurants in the snapshot. And remember, everybody still gets visited by a coordinator to provide technical assistance, but 44 have become eco-certified. They can apply online, and we've started rolling out the recognition. And we have about a dozen applicants for the seed funding who are, wanting a dishwasher and dishware and different things. So it's working. Like I said, there's only 300 in the whole, potentially on the registration list with the VI government as restaurants. So I think whatever, we're getting there. This is part of the promotion portal that EPIC was involved in. So this is the VIX website here, viconservationsociety.org. And so we have an interactive map of those restaurants. You click on them, and then you can see here, like this one has eco features of plastic free and styrofoam free. So we've, as all these other programs have done, we're doing sort of like how to promote them and reward them for going the extra step to be eco-friendly. We have this direct email newsletter where we're recognizing each business as they become certified. We've implemented VIX has implemented a contact management software to allow for every year to follow up and to take note of the changes and how much they earned in seed funding and all of that. And of course, we're doing all the common tabling, press releases, presentations. Our hope, though, is to we just met with some folks to do some radio ads, some video and print ads. There are case studies that are just really powerful where you're interviewing the restaurateur and they're talking about what they did and how it helped them. So again, wanting, those local restaurateurs to be teaching and sharing what worked for them with the other restaurant folks, we think is obviously the most I think practical and makes it more adoptable. Incidentally, having watched a lot of those videos and talked to them, then it feels like one of the number one obstacles is just reluctance to change, right? Because if you're a successful restaurant, it works, it's operating, right? It's fast, it's efficient, you've got your systems in place, and then somebody's coming in saying, hey, why don't you change something? It could be good for you, but why change when it's not broken? And that seems to be one of the initial significant obstacles to participation. We are hoping to do more certifications, and then through our partnerships and, like I said, a funding model, we'd really like to keep it going, as long as we can. I mean, conservation takes time. It can take 10 years, but I think I firmly believe if we stuck at it for 10 years that we would eliminate styrofoam and significantly reduce the plastics, which, by the way, we're going to be able to measure, because as we do that, we calculate, we ask them, how much do you normally buy in a year if we substitute this, right? So we're going to actually have some data in 2 years about how much we've reduced plastic in the landfill. And that's it. Thank you so much. I hope that this connects well enough with you in terms of resilience, and as a potential model program that could be used to help us, reach our goals in the Caribbean Climate Justice Alliance. So thanks so much. Oh, and let me put my email down there, director@epicislands.org. Happy to share and talk to folks if they're passionate about this as I am.
Thanks, Tabitha. Really appreciate it. So I don't know if we have any questions. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, great job on what you're doing. I'm glad you're able to see the impact immediately and that so many people are so interested. In Jamaica, what we did was or what caused the change was a policy decision, because people don't really move without that. So is there a policy that supports your work?
I mean, the answer is yes and no. So the Virgin Islands has a plastic bag and a plastic straw ban. And they went in before COVID with zero enforcement and almost no even PR. And then when COVID came, they just, everybody just stopped doing it because it wasn't sanitary. You had to use a straw or whatever. And even the governor's wife was saying, oh, it's not sanitary. So even public figures were sort of against it. And then, so even on the other side, we quoted that as something we might be able to help with, but there's just no enforcement. And the other problem is some of the bigger places that are visible, and do a high volume, we've got Cost You Less and Price Smart, the bigger whatever we have, they try to do compostable bags or whatever, but we haven't dug in deep enough to find out if those are really greenwashing. They could be just as bad as plastic, but we haven't even gone there yet. But we think maybe that would be a public service to be able to educate those stores. I'd be so curious to hear how enforcement is handled. Is that really part of it? Is it making a difference, or?
The ban itself made a difference, but I don't see where the enforcement is happening. I'm not certain why people followed it, but they did. It was done in stages, and styrofoam was the first one, and now we don't see any styrofoam at all. It used to be lunch boxes was all styrofoam. It was such a part of our culture. You get lunchbox at school when you're working. This is just because everybody buys food from a cook shop because it's so cheap, and it's like your home cooked meal, but cheap on the road. So, and it was all in styrofoam, and we used to that was just part of our culture. Styrofoam ban came when I was in high school, and it just phased out. I just saw I don't see styrofoam anymore. And I'm in my 30s now. Um,
Well,
and
that's a good
then
time.
yeah, and
That's
then
great.
it's made a huge difference on our waters. So we still see plastic bottles because that part of the ban, I don't think that part reached yet. So right now, scandal bags was the next thing, which I still see some scandal bags, especially the small ones that you can put your food in.
Hmm.
But the larger ones that we use, like for supermarkets, no scandal bags. They'll give you, it's still plastic, but it's a reusable plastic bag and they'll sell it to you. So I think that's why they comply with that one, where it's just, I can now sell something more to my customers. They're gonna come in without their bag because they're always gonna forget it and they're gonna buy when they need it because I'm not giving them, they used to just give away scandal bags. And you see them all over the place, just blowing in the wind. Now I don't see them all over the place. I only get the small ones sometimes at a restaurant. And that's a part about compliance where I don't know who to call to say, hey, this restaurant just gave me a plastic bag. And sometimes I refuse it. Sometimes it creates a problem, and you just try your best. But of course, as you know, Caribbean people, we reuse plastic, so I don't throw them away. I still have them. Um, and then sometimes you try to remember to carry it with you so that you don't have to keep getting more stuff. But
I
so
know.
what I saw they do in Antigua is those reusable bags at the supermarket. There's like a wall at the back of the front of the supermarket, and you can just leave and collect. So you're not constantly buying back these reusable because we're buying reusable plastic at almost the same rate as the non-reusable ones at this point. So that's something
That's
I'd love to
clever.
implement. Yeah, in
That's
Jamaica.
actually pretty clever. That
Yeah,
that idea of use and take like that. I
right.
hadn't seen that. That's pretty cool.
And I would love to empty my house of all that I have and just know that I'll get it on the road because I will not remember. Um, and then what was the next phase? I guess plastic forks was supposed to be a phase. I'm not sure which phase it would be in, but some people have moved to wooden forks. I've gotten wooden forks at like Rasta locations or
Mhm.
like, Rasta people are generally earthbound and very savvy with that. But the rest of the no. And in KFC, places like that, they're gonna and KFC is huge here. But what somebody from Jamaica Environment Trust, Teresa, the CEO, was suggesting is that they, like how you're saying, upon request, but in this case, at payment. So, like, would you like the server would ask, would you like a fork with that? That's $50, and then people would probably be like, no, and then start remembering to carry those little pouches of, you know, and then the businesses would say yes because they want that extra charge.
Right.
So I think that's one way of getting it. Because I'm very surprised by how these restaurants just signed on to yours without any, like, what was that conversation like? And then was it slow at first or was it just immediately
For which part? Like in the
getting the
restaurant?
restaurants to sign on? Yeah.
Um, Mixed. I mean, so there are people who like didn't even talk to the court, like just didn't care. But I do think for the most part, and the data does show that general. I mean, if you live in an island, you know what I mean. Like we're so much more connected to nature, I think, in the environment than, like I said, I spend part of my time in the U.S. mainland, and those like it's like out of sight, out of mind. I don't know. I don't. I think the cities are more
No,
city, and
it's
not.
true.
I don't know how to explain it. I think
We
there's
see it in our
um,
gully ways and we see it on the waterfront and we're at the beach and the beach is everywhere. So you
that's
see
right.
it.
I
So we
think.
do,
I mean, that's a
yeah,
theory,
it
but
is.
yeah.
It's a good theory, but we do see it. We do see the plastic bottles is the biggest thing now because everything else has been slowly phasing out. But the plastic bottles is harder to phase out because of all these big juice companies, and they're,
Oh,
Jamaican, and it's like we think of it as part of us, part of our culture again. Even with the styrofoam, it was part of our culture, but it was from the cook shop, but it was imported here. But the juice is we produce it, so what can we? Yeah, and then now the way they excuse this one is they have recycling partners of Jamaica. So they partner with that to recycle those plastic bottles, but they're overwhelmed. And there's just like a whole mound of plastic that they're not able to process right now. And then when they do process it,
Oh,
it's put into chips and then shipped off. So still not great. Like it's not a recycling plastics is just not a great industry. So it'd be best if we could get to reduce it, but I don't see that happening right now, just based off of how entrenched that specific industry is. But
I mean,
hopefully,
we've looked into, I mean, you can get like water. I don't know about the juice, obviously in aluminum recyclable cans, and there is more value in aluminum. So they tend to get recycled. Like we actually have some, businesses that collect aluminum and, it's worth the money to have a business in it. Or cartons, like kind of what, like maybe like a milk carton, maybe. I'm trying to think what else comes in a carton. And at least they're paper and kind of wax and biodegradable, but it's still like if it's still going to the landfill, is it going to totally degrade? But it's a little better than plastic. But I've never had a conversation like with a. This is sort of on our list is to go to the distributors and be like, do you sell water with these alternative packaging? How much more expensive are they? Are they heavier? Like, why is it? But it might just be habit because those plastic water bottles are so cheap. And I bet it's the same thing to produce those plastic bottles. It's probably pennies for
yeah.
them. So,
The option that I use is to refill at a water center, but the bottles are heavy, and now I'm used to it. Like now I can walk around with a 5 liter, but I still can't do the 5 gallon. And so, um, and then most people just aren't thinking that way. They're on the road already. I just already have that mentality of me not pay for water for free. So that's why I don't buy those little water bottles.
I know.
But other people it's just so convenient and it's so hot that you have to. So yeah, it's gonna be hard. But this going to the distributor would be great. Parties also is something else. What's their name? Estuarine is doing that. Estuarine Foundation. They're the marketing team for Sumfest. And so now Sumfest has gone a little bit away from plastic and people are refilling from like a big thing. I don't know.
Hmm.
I'm not a party person. I've never gone, but they've described their thing. So I don't know what it is, but hopefully stuff like that can happen. Like if it's at a fun place where it can enter people's minds of
Hmm.
it's not work, it's fun, but it's eco-friendly. Yeah. They also have the lights off festival. What's that called? Earth Hour. Yeah.
Hmm. That also reminds me too, like one of the other projects that we did with VIX before this was putting water bottle filling stations in schools because school kids didn't have any access. You had to bring like plastic water bottles to school every day, right? It's hot. And the school water wasn't filtered, but those filling stations they're kind of, I mean, maybe they're some thousand USD or something. They're pretty expensive, but they do a pretty good job. You have to kind of make sure they're right for the thing. And then they did manage to put some like near where one of the tourism areas are. So you could go in a little visitor station, use the restroom and fill your water bottle. So I don't know. I wonder about that because that if it was free, I mean, I know some places objected because they probably make a lot of money selling tourists, or even like we haven't broached it with the restaurants, but I mean, even I worked at a nature center and they were like, oh, we don't want to stop doing plastic water bottles. And this was 20 years ago because we make so much money from them. I mean, the markup is really good. So I know there's going to be resistance there, but the pressures of the trash and the waste, as you can see, it's really pretty polluted there. Maybe we could get more people to adopt, free, like you said, free water, bring reusable. We thought about doing that also like at Carnival and other things and having like a water truck and stuff. So is
Mhm.
that it's kind of like what you're talking about a little bit, right? Like bigger stations where people can not have to buy.
Yeah,
But there's
definitely.
a lot of Caribbean islands trying to deal with the water piece. I really think so.
And as you're saying, schools are the important parts where, they're gonna grow up and they also like spread it to other people because the kids love talking about the new things. And they will bring it back to their household and talk about it and say, Mom, why are you doing that? So we always try to start with the kids and cafeteria is a good place because the school cafeteria because they can, as you were saying with the containers, like if people are coming with it unclean or something, they can
Mhm.
easily check and refuse and people students tend to comply easily because schools are already so strict. So they'll come with their clean containers. And then also it could help with how we feed our kids because a lot of kids do grow hungry and thirsty. So if you had accessible water, I've seen kids literally trying to drink off of railings. So we do have to give them more access. So it's not just about the selling of the bottles. It's like who can like in getting more eco-friendly, you're also getting more people-friendly. Um, so yeah, and then stuff like iced tea, like tea is so easy to make. Like, why are we doing these big juice companies when you could just be giving kids iced tea to drink? Like, just let them like have different ways of making sure kids are fed and also not polluting, because it's the world that they have to live in the future. Yeah.
Well, the other thing I thought I'd mention, I'm glad we had this really good conversation, is apparently somebody told me like 20 years ago there used to be a Caribbean sustainable waste like working group, because we just exchanged like such great ideas and information from just two locations. It would be really neat to be looking at that across the board and figuring out, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's some value in that in terms of, the alliance. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe waste isn't as exciting, but it's a real issue. I mean, it's a big, big issue.
No,
So,
but then also it's not exciting maybe at first, but then when you start talking about it and realizing how it's connected and how kind of ridiculous it is. I was doing an interview, and I was talking this person is American, and when I said there is no, sanitary landfill in Jamaica, we only have dumps, and they were so shocked that the entire interview became about that when it was supposed to be youth in climate in general. Because she was so shocked, like, what? You're just so stupid, what? And she just kept going on. And I felt a little attacked because I'm like, I know it's stupid, but it's not like I can do anything about it. But realizing that this is so common in the Caribbean and everywhere else is not. It was a
yeah.
conversation. It does become like people do get interested when you really look at it, because when you look at it, it is insane. Like, it is, what is this? It's there has to be a solution. And then we say that we don't contribute to climate change a lot in the Caribbean, and we don't. But I think garbage is probably one of the ways that, with the methane that's produced, is probably one of the ways that we would, because it's not going to be our energy consumption. But the garbage, we produce so much
Mhm.
garbage for our small islands.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the schools piece is a major like justice issue. I mean, I can't believe, kids like in the Virgin Islands don't have drinking water at school. Like it's hot. That's
And
just
they're supposed to be there.
that's unfair. That's just so wrong. I don't know. We were just shocked. And that's another one where I've told people and they're like, "Really? They can't believe that. There's not a water fountain?" No. Matter of fact, I saw a lady in the airport filling her bottle in the restroom and I was like, "Oh." I was like, "Oh, no, you can't do that." She like really didn't know. So,
Yeah, it's bad. And those water refill stations that, everything is a business now, but though schools would be a great location for that, because even parents coming in would just refill and go home and stuff like that. And then students would now walk around with their reusable containers. Um, so I could see the difference in like a rich town school as opposed to a country school, in terms of they will walk with igloos full of
mm,
water. And in country, we just don't have it. We just don't have the water. And that's where I see people drinking off our railings. So it's just the differences. Life is so unfair.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I I just wanna flag real quick. So I saw we have another participant who joined on. So happy that you're here, Maurice. Here. So we're just actually only wrapping up end of the webinar. I just wanted to confirm, Davia, that you're okay with because we are recording a section to upload to YouTube, so you're okay with the conversation that we've had so far. Yeah? Okay, nice. Um, so yeah, well, thanks very much for that. So yes, Mauricia, we are actually at the end of the webinar. However, we are going to be sharing the recording. So we did record um the webinar and the conversations, really good conversations with Davia and Tabitha today. So really, really, really excited to see where this can go, especially when we share the information. So yes, it was 12 p.m. AST. So I'm not sure where you are, that it may have been a bit of a time difference. So, but don't worry, you will definitely get a recording. So not so fair at all. But just to end, Trinidad is doing some really cool things with our partner, Closed Loop Caribbean, on composting hubs to address this direct issue as well, Tabitha. So maybe another time we could always chat a little bit further on it. And So I'm just going to end the recording here.